The pod hissed as it opened, cool air rushing in. I blinked against the dim light of the lab, still half caught in the rain-slicked courtyard of the fortress. For a moment, I expected to hear the hiss of arrows or the crash of steel. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. I pulled myself up, muscles stiff, and turned. Only one glow remained among the rows of pods. Dev, leaning against the console, tapping notes into her tablet. She looked tired but amused, caramel skin catching the faint blue glow from the monitors. "You cut it close, Tester." Her voice carried that mix of warning and warmth. "If you weren't out by 2, I was pulling the plug." I gave her a weak grin, rubbing the back of my neck. "Guess I made it with, 17 minutes to spare?" 18, she corrected, sliding her tablet under her arm. "Don't make me babysit you like that again." I laughed softly, though my chest still heaved from the fight. "Could have fooled me. You look like you were enjoying the data." "Only because you broke the boss again." She smirked, shaking her head. "The loot progression's mirroring your loadout choices. That's not supposed to happen, but the data is priceless." I leaned back against the pod, closing my eyes for a second. My body screamed for sleep. Dev's tone softened. "We're off until 2 this afternoon. Staff meeting then, timeline updates, project changes, all that boring stuff." My eyes flicked open. "So, I have 12 hours?" 12 hours. She arched a brow, then added with a faint smile, "Don't spend all of them dreaming about samurai, right?" I chuckled, pushing myself upright. No promises. The thought of her waiting for me, keeping the lights on until I logged out, settled deeper than I wanted to admit. The conference room felt unusually quiet for the start of a staff meeting. I slid into a chair beside Dev, who gave me a subtle, knowing smile, the kind that made my chest tighten just slightly. Everyone else was already there. Jin, Sub, Glyph, and a few of the newer testers, their tablets and VR logs spread across the polished table. The holo display flickered to life. The first slide showed the remaining animation work for the storyline. Intro-outro productions is wrapping up the last of the cutscenes. Glyph began, pointing at the holo with a stylus. "They're looking solid. We should have everything finalized in about 6 weeks." I nodded, jotting down a few notes. Dev leaned slightly toward me, whispering, 6 more weeks. You ready to see your Oni mass chaos in the final cut?" I smirked, though I didn't answer. Sub took over, shifting the conversation toward testing timelines. "We have 12 weeks left to finish all testing for Samurai of the Future. That's chapters 1 through 5, all loot progression, environmental hazards, AI behavior, and PvP scenarios." I rubbed my chin. 12 weeks is tight, but doable if we're coordinated. Glyph interjected. Righteous Blade, the parent company, wants this title released in 29 weeks. That means post-testing adjustments, QA, and marketing prep need to be slotted perfectly. No surprises. The room hummed with agreement. Everyone knew the pressure was high. Mistakes at this point weren't just data points, they could be company shaking. Dev's voice cut in softly, but I felt it directly in my chest. "We've already uncovered some quirks in the environmental AI and loot triggers. With careful testing, we can smooth these over. And I've got logs from your last session, Tester, that would help us validate the loot progression." I nodded, feeling that subtle pride bubble. She glanced at me with a raised brow, almost teasing. "Careful, you're getting this smug glow again." I smiled, leaning back as Glyph continued. "Let's get organized. Everyone has their assignments. Priority 1, finalize Chapter 4 testing with the new loot mechanics and the Oni mask interactions. Priority 2, ensure Chapter 3's boss fights are completely stable. Priority 3, any edge case exploits must be logged immediately." Subside, edge case exploits? Tester, we already know you're the champion in that category. I felt a blush creeping up. Dev nudged my shoulder lightly under the table. "Don't encourage him," she whispered with a smile. The meeting wrapped up with assignments, timelines, and reminders about the looming 6-week animation finalization and the overall 29-week release plan. I couldn't help but glance at Dev as everyone filtered out of the room. She caught my eye, gave a small shrug and a grin, and whispered, "See you in the lab for the next round?" I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Jin leaned back in his chair once the meeting wrapped, his tablet snapping shut with a crisp clack. "All right, everybody. You've earned it." Take the rest of the day off, recharge, and be back here bright and early tomorrow. We got a full stack of tests waiting, so don't come in half asleep." A wave of relieved murmurs passed through the room. Sub stretched his arms wide. Lift was already halfway out the door, and even some of the newer testers looked grateful. I exhaled slowly, my mind still buzzing with timelines, loop progression, and the firestorm of AI quirks I'd been wrestling with. Beside me, Dev tilted her head. "You hungry?" "Always," I admitted, though my voice carried more fatigue than humor. She grinned, brushing her hair back behind her ear. "Let's do an early dinner. Something calm, nothing fancy. Then we call it a day before either of us falls asleep mid-sentence." That didn't sound bad at all. In fact, it sounded like exactly what I needed. I rose from my chair, slinging my jacket over my shoulder. "Deal. Dinner, then straight to bed. I'm still feeling last night's late run." "Same," she admitted with a laugh. "You have no idea how close I was to dragging you out of that pot." "I know," I said, smirking. "I would have deserved it." We walked out together, the low hum of the office fading as the doors shut behind us. The sky outside was soft with early evening light, the kind of glow that made everything look a little quieter, a little slower. We didn't need plans beyond dinner and rest. The simplicity of it was enough. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I let the pressure of timelines and bosses and loot tables slide off my shoulders. Tonight wasn't about the game. It was just Dev and me. We stepped into the quiet corner of a cozy bistro, the warm glow of lanterns casting soft shadows across the table. The clink of cutlery and low hum of conversation felt like a world apart from the flashing screens and beeping consoles of the lab. I slid into the seat across from Dev, and she gave me that look, the one that was equal parts amused and soft, like she was daring me to be serious and silly all at once. "Wine?" she asked, glancing at the small selection on the table. "Water's fine," I said, waving her offer off. I wasn't here to drink, not tonight. I was here to just exist in the same space with her. We ordered simply, letting the menu be a placeholder for conversation. The first bites arrived, and I realized I wasn't even tasting the food. My attention was on her. "So," she said, leaning slightly forward, elbows on the table, "tell me something that isn't about work or loot or code. Something real." I laughed quietly, a low chuckle. That's a tall order for me. But, okay. I guess I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. Her eyes flicked up to mine, curious. "Next?" "Yeah," I said, picking at a bite of my salad, but not really eating it. "Life. After the game, after the deadlines. You know, real life. Family, goals, stuff like that." Her lips curved into a small, teasing grin. "And where do I fit into this real life?" I met her gaze head on. "You're kind of central." The words were simple, but the weight behind them made her pause. She leaned back, pretending to sip her water, but giving me a look that made it clear she noticed. "Central, huh?" she whispered, almost to herself. "That's dangerous." "Dangerous?" I asked, smirking despite myself. She laughed, a soft, melodic sound. "Because I could get used to it. And I might hold you to it." I swallowed, a grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." The rest of dinner was a mix of light teasing, shared stories from our past, and little glimpses of the future. She asked me about my family, my faith, the small things that shaped me, and I listened, enthralled, letting her speak and laughing with her. By the time we were polishing off the dessert, the world outside the bistro seemed to have slowed. The stress of deadlines, the grind of testing, the long nights of VR sessions, all of it felt distant, like it didn't matter for these few hours. She reached across the table, brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "You know," she said softly, "I think I like these kind of nights. Just us. No missions, no bosses, no codes to fix." "Yeah," I agreed. "Just us. And I like that too." For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't think about strategy, stats, or samurai. I just thought about her. The night outside had deepened, and when we finally left the bistro, her hand found mine naturally. Warm, steady. I squeezed it lightly, knowing we were both tired but perfectly content to walk slowly, letting the evening stretch on just a little longer. The office was quiet when I arrived, the morning light filtering through the blinds in thin, straight lines across the floor. Dev was already there, sitting with her tablet open, scribbling notes in her usual meticulous way. Glyph, Sub, and Jin had claimed the conference table, and the smell of strong coffee hung in the air. I took my seat beside Dev, noticing the slight tension in her shoulders. She hadn't slept poorly, but I knew she was still running at full focus. Jin stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his voice cutting through the low hum of early chatter. "All right, team, listen up." Everyone quieted immediately. There was that sharp authority in his tone that always demanded attention. "The timeline has been set," he continued. "For the next 2 weeks, we focus solely on grinding up levels and finishing testing on all 5 chapters of Samurai of the Future. After that, we move into full raid testing." I nodded along, feeling the weight of the next fortnight pressing down. 2 weeks of relentless grind, coordinating strategies, hunting loot, and replaying every chapter. Glyph leaned forward, tapping a pen against his notebook. "Are we talking solo runs or coordinated sessions?" "Both," Jin replied. "Tester and Dev will handle targeted solo runs when necessary. The rest of you coordinate for larger team tests, especially for end-of-chapter bosses. The goal is to uncover any hidden exploits, balance issues, and loot inconsistencies before raid testing begins. No shortcuts." Sub grunted, rubbing his hands together. "So, basically, live in VR for the next 2 weeks." "Pretty much," Jin said. "Level caps, boss mechanics, environmental interactions, everything." "Dev, Tester, you two make sure the last few chapters aren't giving unexpected results." I felt Dev shift slightly beside me, leaning in as if seeking a little reassurance. I gave her a small nod, my way of saying we've got this. She returned a faint smile, one that carried all the silent confidence we shared from late-night grind sessions. Jin moved on, writing a few bullet points on the whiteboard. "Remember, loot consistency is key. Rewards should match effort. And keep meticulous notes, especially any environmental interactions, triggers, or anomalies. We need clean data before raid testing."